So is the US economy slowing? Well, I think if you ask the President of the United States, he'd probably tell you the economy is booming, that a lot of things are going in the right direction, that the US is taking in a lot of new business from overseas, taking in a lot of money from the tariffs, and making some fantastic trade deals. However, the economic data doesn't really tell us the same story. Yes, we saw some strong data. GDP growth was 3% for the second quarter in the US, although we do know that that was due mainly to a lack of imports. When the US is importing less, bringing less into the country, paying less, obviously, for the goods that they're importing, but yet continuing to export to other countries, yes, GDP definitely looks good. When you're paying less and receiving more money for your exports, of course, GDP is going to move higher. But it's the lack of imports that's the concern. So when you look at GDP, you would say, yeah, the country is doing well. But then you move over to something like, for example, unemployment. We're seeing unemployment rates in the US slightly tick higher, 4.2% on the last reading. And we're seeing jobs growth. Jobs growth is what has spooked the markets over the last week or so. We received the jobs data on Friday out of the US. And yes, it showed a decrease in jobs growth below expectations. Roughly 73,000 jobs were created for the month of July. But it was the revisions that came out to the previous 2 months, June and May. Those were numbers that were not anticipated, and that really took down this market. A lot of people now, a lot of investors, economists, really being fearful of the stagflation worry, which is slowing growth but higher prices. And so I guess it depends on what you focus on, right? If you want to focus on even retail sales, GDP, you might say the economy is doing just fine. But if you want to focus on perhaps the jobs market or the lack of durable goods spending, that also was disappointing. We received the number as well yesterday, Tuesday, about services, the service sector. That number came in below expectations. So we're starting to see the beginnings of a slowdown in the US. I believe that that is the case, even though talking to Treasury Secretary or anybody in the Trump administration, they would probably tell you otherwise. Our first chart that we have here shows the unemployment, or shows, sorry, the jobs growth by month. And you could see here that for the month of July, we grew 73,000 jobs. And that again was below expectations. Expectations were for about 100,000 jobs created for the month of July. But take a look just to the left of that bar there. We have the revisions. The revisions shaved off 258,000 jobs for the months of May and June. The jobs growth for May, 19,000 jobs created, and for June, just 14,000 jobs. Now, yes, 73,000 jobs, a lot higher. So maybe we saw a bit of a spike for the month of July, or maybe that will eventually be revised downward as well. So jobs growth, definitely disappointing. Our next chart talks a bit about inflation. I wanted to put this chart here because, as I just said, the word stagflation, when you have higher prices or prices moving higher, but you have slower growth, you get stagflation. And we're seeing prices moving higher in the US. We're hearing from many corporations talking about raising prices. We're seeing here we had the PCE, personal consumption and expenditures. We had this data given to us recently in the last week or so. And you could see 2.8% is the core reading, and the headline number, 2.6%, getting closer to that 3% mark. Obviously, as we all know, and as we talk about on this show all the time, we would love to see, or the Fed would love to see this closer to 2%. And now this number is creeping back up to 3%. So higher prices, the unemployment rate slightly ticking higher. We're seeing jobs growth really starting to slow. Durable goods starting to slow. Services, our service sector, which has been the strength, I should say, the US service sector, which has been the strength for the United States, that looks like may be slowing as well with the data that we received just yesterday. So is the economy slowing? Well, I guess it's up to interpretation. Our next chart that we have as well This is a chart. This shows, there it is, GDP growth. And you could see for the first quarter in the US, GDP growth was a negative number. And now, second quarter, a definite rebound. And again, that was due to a lack of imports coming into the United States. Our next chart, we have one more chart, I believe. Here, there it is. And it shows that growth actually accelerated in July as rising demand for services offset manufacturing dip. However, when you look at the last statistic that you have here, which is a flash US manufacturing PMI, 49.5 was the latest reading. We know that any reading below 50 shows contraction. And as you can see here, it is at a 7-month low. And therefore, we've seen a number of months showing contraction in the US on the manufacturing side. So I think you could probably sum everything up into saying that the US economy is definitely starting to slow. We still are seeing some strength in the economy, but definitely tariffs are starting to show up right across the board, whether it's in the automotive industry, whether it's in the housing market or the housing industry, or whether it's in pretty much any industry, pharmaceuticals. Probably the only industry that I can think of where we're not seeing really the effects of tariffs as yet in terms of pricing, that would be in the tech space, the tech industry. Technology seems to be moving a lot better, coping with the tariffs a lot better. And I guess it's all going to depend on China-U.S. relationships and how we see those over the coming days and weeks. Can a trade deal or can some more negotiations happen between the two superpowers or the two biggest economies in the world? And I think that will dictate how technology moves and that sector moves. But overall, make no mistake about it, I believe the US economy continues to slow and will continue to slow as we see prices continue to move higher and growth start to slow. And hopefully, for the US's sake, we don't see unemployment rise, but I think that could be inevitable as businesses remain on hold until they get some clarity with respect to tariffs and the economy.